All right, everyone, how's it going? Are you good? I'm good. I've got a bit of the Namthrax. I was in Anaheim last week attending the boss's big signature bass debut at the Dingwall booth. And yeah, I got it. Brought it home. Brought it to London. But I'm better. I'm better. I'm not contagious. So, on this week's episode of our podcast, is breakfast included? I sit down with my good friend John Douglas. Now, John is a drummer, an artist, a drum tech. He does it all, but he doesn't do it at the same time. But I bet he could. I bet he could. We sit down, we get into how he got started, basically, from his first band to his first major label album to teching for several major label bands, including ZZ Top and Van Halen, to how he started painting rock stars. Anyway, it's a great story. It's an amazing story. You might know who John Douglas is. He'll tell you if you happen to catch the Aerosmith residency in Vegas the last few years. Anyway, had a lot of fun. I appreciate John taking the time to do this. Let's check it out. Tell me who you are.
Hey, Bernie. This is John Douglas. What do I say after that? I don't even.
Well, what do you do, John?
What do I do? Yeah. I guess my standard answer to that question is depends on what day of the week it is. So I think in order of birth, I'm a drummer, artist, drum tech. I think that would be the order.
Yeah.
Of things. Sometimes all three.
Yeah. As I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. But not simultaneously.
No. Where are you from originally?
Born in Illinois and then moved to Texas, Houston, Texas, the summer before 8th grade. My dad worked for Shell Oil his whole life and was a research chemist and got transferred down here. So I've been here, the bicycle years were up north, and then down here was, junior high and high school. And I've been here ever since. So
right there in where is it? Houston, the Houston area?
I'm outside of Houston now. Yeah.
Cool. When did you start playing drums?
Before I could even remember, my parents would tell me that I was banging on pots and pans, with anything I could find, until eventually I found my mother's knitting needles, which made great drumsticks. But then I took band all through school. That's where I learned. Obviously, this was pre-internet and all that stuff. We didn't really have money for private lessons or anything, so I took band and did concert band and symphonic band and then 4 years of marching band, and that's where I learned.
So you read music, all that stuff.
Yeah.
What was the band you played in? I'm sorry.
When?
Before Kick Tracy.
Let's see. Lots of high school bands. There was a band called Destiny in high school. Out of that was a band called Rage. That Rage was that was like my college. Those guys were older than I was, and way more experienced. I used to go sneak into clubs to go see them play, and I'd go back to my band and say, "Man, that's what we got to be like." And then eventually, somehow, I have no idea how, even I heard that they were looking for a new drummer. And, somehow I got them like a cassette tape and I got this gig, and they were a working band. They carried lights and sound, and, they had a crew, and, the Texas rock circuit back then in the 80s was super strong.
Yeah.
And that's what I did for 3 years. That's how I learned to be, my opinion, learned to be, a professional musician, drummer, to play 5-6 nights a week, 52 weeks a year for 3 years straight. And I think that's where I learned to be a drum tech, because when you don't have a tech, you do it all, right? So I had to learn how to repair things, how to stay on top of things so that nothing broke during the show. And So after Rage, there was a band called XOX in Houston, and then it was Kick Tracy. That's
And
kind of the brief
yeah, so you
brief
joined Kick
synopsis.
Tracy, replacing the drummer at the time, or were you?
They yeah, they had just gotten signed to RCA, and their drummer, who is a friend of mine, now I didn't know them then, decided it wasn't what he wanted to do, and so they were looking, and somehow they got my name through a couple other drummers from Houston, Bobby Rock and Blas Elias. Those guys are both, we all came up kind of together in different high schools, but in different bands, but knew each other here in Houston. So yeah, that's how my name got thrown in that ring.
I heard at one point all you guys used to hang out at the same drum store or the music store.
Yeah. Yep.
I had a tour manager, Einar Peterson, who worked at that drum store for a while, but he's a bass player, and he was always.
What was his name?
Einar Peterson.
That's an unusual name.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember that name. I mean, wow.
But he's like, yeah, there was something about that place. All the badass drummers came out of there.
Well, I mean, it was a killer store nationwide, let alone in the area. I mean, it was the place to go and hang and get your gear and meet people and yeah, I met a lot of great people that I'm still friends with today, and I worked there for a couple of years. That was my last real job, working there. It was a breeding ground for all the Houston players, man. It was cool.
Yeah,
it was a cool hang.
So when you joined Kick Tracy, I mean, that was late 80s, early 90s. I mean,
that was 90s, yeah.
90s. I mean, a record deal, that's when a record deal was still a big deal.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
Was it everything that you'd expect?
No. Well, back then when you just think, oh, cha-ching, record deal, you made it. That was the thing. Oh, dude, he made it, And that's, of course, that's the American dream at that point, was you thought you made it when you got a record deal, but that simply is not the case, was not the case, and still not the case. I mean, it's just another step, and it's like your ticket in the game.
Yeah.
So of course, I mean, it was a great time. I mean, I have nothing but love and fond memories of that time and the guys in the band and everything. Just terrible timing. Our first record came out in 91, right when Nevermind came out, and we were an LA band with Hair, so we were, if you lived through it, that seemingly overnight the landscape changed, to Nirvana, and then all of a sudden everything in LA was 80s. Even though our first record came out in 91, we were still kind of considered an 80s hair band, because everything that came before that was lumped into that. Yeah. And I think we're even on the Rolling Stones top 50 hair bands of all time list. Kind of like, it's just because we had hair. Everybody had hair.
Right?
Back, so it's whatever. But I mean, it's an honor to make a list like that, I guess. But it's just funny how I didn't consider us that. But anyway, so the first album came out when Nevermind was sweeping the nation, and we put out another record after that, but just it didn't go anywhere. And by that time, you gotta, I was realizing I gotta earn a living.
I say right about that time is when you started drum teching, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the Kick Tracy kind of imploded, and again with the weight of everything, and I came back home to Texas, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and at that point I had been painting drums for a few people, but primarily the guys in ZZ Top.
Okay.
And so I was friends with those, and in particular Frank Beard, the drummer. So he knew what was going on, and like I say, I've been painting drums for them now for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years at this point. And he goes, "Hey man, come, we're fixing the tour. Come be my drum tech." And I was like, "Oh, what?" I mean, that's the worst part of being a drummer is, setting up the crap but I had no other prospects at the time. And I figured at least I know the guys in the band. They knew me. I knew Frank's gear because I've been painting it for years. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. Because again, I had nothing else to sink my teeth into, and I needed to do something. And so that's what I did. And I did my first tour all over the world with those guys. And I came home and I thought, yeah, I don't ever need to do that again. Because, once the tour leaves, as I mean, I love putting it together. Obviously, I love painting the kit and building the kit, assembling the kit and all that stuff and prepping, because that's all kind of creative work for me.
Right, yeah.
But then touring is the opposite of that. It's just do the same thing every day in a different city, so that was not for me, or so I thought. So, that was kind of my first taste of it. And I came home and I thought, yeah, I don't ever need to do that again. But for the first time in my life, I had money in the bank. And that's an eye opener.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
yeah,
it was kind of the same thing with me when I started teching.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the first time I had a bank account.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, oh, wow, I can breathe.
Yeah. I felt like Johnny Depp when they hand him that piece of paper and blow, and he's looking at how much money he has in the account.
All those zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not quite like that, but
not quite.
Same feeling.
Yeah. So you were designing and painting kits before you were tech.
Yes. Yeah. Just started with me. I mean, again, the order of who I am, a drummer first, and then I had some art talent. So as soon as I could, I mean, I was painting my kick drum heads in high school, and I can remember other drummers and other guys like, what are you doing? It's not going to ruin the sound. And I'm like, it's a kick drum. You shove pillows in there. What do you mean sound? And plus it looks cool, So I was already taking my drums apart, and initially because I started life with an orange sparkle 5-piece kit, no brand, no name, Sears catalog kind of a kit. And then as soon as, of course, I discovered Rush or Kiss or any of these bands, it's like, well, I gotta have more drums. I gotta have another kick drum, and I couldn't afford to go out and order, a matching drum. So I would just get the cheapest whatever I could, red sparkle here, and then the artist in me couldn't handle, it's like, well, they got to be all the same color.
Yeah.
So I started wrapping my drums really early on with like this chrome, like shelf paper, contact paper. I'd buy at the grocery store, took the drums all apart and wrapped them in chrome. And, from 50 feet away, they look great. You get up close and it was a terrible job, but it served its purpose for years. And then I started, painting and adding stuff, hoses and meters and just stuff onto my drums. I've always kind of been attracted to modifying stuff. I mean, I used to modify my bicycles. I used to paint my Hot Wheels cars, and I didn't leave anything stock. Yeah, stock. Just now in hindsight, of course, I if I had that stuff in original form, still I'd be very rich, but I didn't. I mean, I had the the Schwinn muscle bike that are very collectible right now. Well, I painted mine, so I ruined everything, including drums. So yeah, I started. So I was painting my drums. Long story short, playing in town. When Frank from ZZ Top came out and saw my band play, commented on my drums. Hey, those are cool. Who painted those? I said, I did. Oh, would you want to paint drums for me? And I was kind of like, well, okay, sure. And that's how it happened.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. And was he the only one you were doing that for once you became their tech, or had word spread already?
Word spread. It didn't take long at all. Actually, the first drum kit, by the time I ordered a kit, or he ordered it, I didn't know, he ordered the drums for me to paint. I had painted 2 kits for Steven Adler, Guns N' Roses, while he was still with GNR. So technically the very first drums I ever painted for anybody other than myself was for the biggest band on the planet, at the time. It was Guns N' Roses in the late, whatever that was, 87 or something, whenever Steven Adler was, still in the band. And I did 2 kits for him. So that was the first ones I ever painted for anybody. And then Frank was, while I was waiting for Frank's drums to arrive. So yeah, it's all serendipity, of like who, how it is. It's, that was from that drum shop. I was working at that drum shop, and I had a Yamaha snare drum that I had painted for me, and I had it up on the shelf, and I was, working on my drums on company time, that kind of deal. And somebody came in and, commented on my kit, got my card. And then months later, he called me, and he was the drum tech for GNR. Yeah. Called me at the drum shop.
Yeah.
Cause I didn't, anyway, so yeah, that's how that happened. And then once, guys like that are out there playing drums that I painted, same thing happened. Somebody's opening for, first thing that happened was Extreme was opening for ZZ Top when Extreme blew up with their big More Than Words and stuff. And Extreme was opening for ZZ, and Paul Geary, the drummer, saw Frank's kit. Hey, who did that? Boom. Next thing you know, I was painting kits for Extreme, and, it just kind of went from that. And that's why I was still playing drums in Kick Tracy. I painted drums in my hotel room for other people, like after the show. Wow. I carried other people's drums in the bus, and I'd play the show, Kick Tracy, and then I'd go back to my room and I'd paint other people's drums.
Yeah. How long does that take? Once depending on what somebody wants, or
what they want and the size of the kid, and and then there's no every job is different. That's kind of the whole point, is to do custom stuff. So sometimes the artwork is super involved. Sometimes it's simpler, and then I had to learn how to do the refinishing part, the actual, like the clear coat and all that stuff. Again, pre-internet, so there was no. All I know is everybody called them, it's a lacquer finish. Oh yeah, that's a lacquer finish.
Yeah.
And so when I first started, I used lacquer. Well, they're still called lacquer finishes, but nobody uses lacquer on drums anyway. So I had to learn all that by trial and error. And then when you find the product to use, in this case, it's a catalyzed urethane, it's automotive paint. When you find the product, you look at it, and the instructions, and all it says is for professional use only. So I was not a professional, so that wasn't much help.
So you had some art background, but all this was self-taught, trial and error.
Yes, trial and error. Yeah, I took art in high school, art and music. That's always been my thing. I always took art. I always took band. Took a couple classes in photography later on when I had an open, slot for another elective. But yeah, art and music has always been my thing. Yeah.
Of all those artists that you've painted drums for, built drums for, has there ever been one that says, "Hey, you just do your thing, surprise me"?
Yes, and that's a kiss of death. It's flattering, I get that, I love everything you do. Just do something. I'm like, yeah, no, I've done enough to know they have expectations. So the only person I do that for now is Frank Beard from ZZ Top.
Okay.
And that took a while to get there, where, certainly while I was teching, I teched for him like for 12 years or something. And we would discuss stuff, and then I would go home and paint it. And then when I got out of circulation with them, stopped teching for them, then it was just like, hey, I want another drum kit. And then it was the more removed I got from the camp on like a daily basis, I would order the drums and I would just do it and then surprise him. I mean, he would like walk in the door and they'd be set, surprised, so, and then it got to be that he was like, hey man, the more I'm out of it, the better I like it, so he just kind of, he gives me all that creative freedom, which on the one hand certainly is awesome. I mean, I wish all clients were like that in some ways, but it's also a big burden. It's a lot of pressure to, I got to come up with, I got to feel like I got to outdo the last kit. And, obviously it's for him. So it's got to work within that band, which, that band of all bands that I've ever painted for, that band has visually and stylistic, they have a lot of things you can really grab a hold of and
Yeah.
gravitate towards. And so I have a really long creative leash there, which is cool. I love it.
All right, right on, man.
Yeah.
So you not only paint them, you actually build drums too, right? Like,
Well, I'm not a drum builder. For them, I usually modify something,
yeah,
a drum wise, like Frank in particular. I designed this rack 20 some years ago that's like off axis and there's no center support between the two kick drums. And I thought, well, with no center support between the kick drums, I can do something really kooky in the middle. Plus, he triggers all his drums.
yeah,
So it didn't matter what they sounded like. So again, now you're wide open because usually I got to consider what the drum's going to sound like. So, but for Frank on the toms, it's all triggered. And so now I was wide open to build something really wacky, especially in that middle rack tom between the two kick drums.
mm-hmm.
I've used North drums that sound hideous but look cool, and then typically I'll build a really long drum, and sometimes I'll carve it, and it's just, again, I get a long leash and really get to exercise some creativity, or try to.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
One more question about your drum painting and building.
Yeah.
I've seen and crossed paths. I crossed paths with a lot of your drum sets before I knew you. And then since I've met you, I've crossed paths with more. What's the most difficult one? Now, if you ask me personally, you were telling me about the kit you designed for Joey Kramer with the little stones for the.
Oh yeah.
And I would think that would be the hardest one, but is that?
Well, that's a different tedious. Yeah, I did. I've done 3 Swarovski crystal kits. The first one I did was from Alex Gonzalez from Mana.
Mm-hmm.
And that was tedious, but there's nothing like it when you see it. I mean, that nothing reacts like Swarovski crystal under stage lights. I mean, it's like, it's the bling of all bling. And, Joey wanted that. And so the one I did for Mana was clear crystals on a black kit. We were going for extreme contrast, so for Joey's, I said, well, I've done that. I'm trying not to repeat myself. So I recommended, hey, let's do a clear kit. Let's do an acrylic kit. And then I'll do some stones on that. So I came up with a pattern. Again, I did like a sample of the smallest drum so that he could see it.
Yeah.
And then he said, okay, go. So I did that. And that was tedious. I think that was like about 40 or 50,000 rhinestones that I glue one at a time. So super tedious, super repetitive. But the upside is I do it at my dining room table, and there is no clear coating and sanding and buffing, so it's tedious in the art department and in the application. But then once it's done, once you put the stones on there, it's done.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. And then the kit that you saw that I did for Vegas, when the Vegas residency was announced, Joey and I were talking about kits, and he's like, it's Vegas, man. I gotta have bling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we just did a bling, but again, ultimately it's their call, it's their kit, it's their statement. So I came up with some concepts, Vegas specific, which is again, pretty easy to do, Vegas, so I did that and kind of took it to the next level, where I used, I don't know how many different colors of stones and shades to do this artwork. And that one was, I think, 70 or 80,000 stones, one at a time, in different sizes. And so that was tedious to the nth degree. But again, man, when it's done, you just go, wow, there's, because we'll never do that.
When I asked you about that particular kit, you had this like 1,000-yard stare, and almost like you were going back to that.
It is a mind-numbing procedure. And I remember I was on that one. We did started with black pearl, shells, painted. and then I did like the playing cards, on the drums with the spade and the hearts and the diamonds and all that stuff. And of course, there's two red, there's two black. Well, I couldn't do black on a black drum, so I did kind of grays and again all the shading. Well, I got in the groove, and I did like a diamond, which is shades of gray, and then the next one, I alternated. The next one was like a heart, and I didn't change colors, and I did the whole next one not red. I did it grays because I was just in a groove, and I just did the whole other one, which is hours of work, only to discover when I finished it what I did. And I had to scrape all those stones off, hoping I didn't ruin the shell underneath. So yeah, that's apparently I'm supposed to pay attention to what I'm doing.
Well, man, you've been a drum tech for some of the biggest bands out there: ZZ Top, Van Halen, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Joey Kramer. We'll get to that in a minute. Since you started with ZZ Top, who was still one of the biggest bands out there, did your career just stay in that level? Or do you like leave ZZ Top and then go, okay, I'll do this club band for a while? Or do you go from ZZ Top to like a Sammy Hagar and,
Well, I think I've been very blessed in that I kind of stayed at that level. First thing I did was I tried not to go from tour to tour to tour, because I always had typically I would do like a ZZ Top tour, and then I would have artwork lined up for when I got home, either painting drums or whatever, guitars or whatever. If paint will stick to it, I'll paint it. So typically I would just all the ZZ Top years, when they weren't touring, I was just home painting. And then I would do some studio stuff with them when they were making the records. Back then they were still on the album tour cycle, that we all knew. Remember those days? Yeah. So I would help a little bit in the studio, but then I would just be home painting, because I didn't, that now I had kids, and, I just road dog, but I was never full fledged. I didn't go from tour to tour to tour.
Yeah.
I just tried not to. So in those years, initially, I was just doing ZZ Top, and then, until I got the call from Van Halen, and I was just like, oh, I gotta do that.
Yeah.
So that was 1997. So yeah, I've not gone, thankfully, not that there's anything bad with it, but I paid my dues in the clubs as the drummer and the drum tech, so I have not gone back to that. I've pretty much stayed at arena level, I think.
Right on. So 97 Van Halen, that tour, was that Sammy or David?
No, that was neither. That was Gary Cherone.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the Gary album in 98 was when that came out in that tour. So I'm one of the few Van Halen crew guys that have done all three singers. So I did the Gary tour, which was short-lived. Great guy. And then Sam came back in 2004. So I did that. And then 2006, 2007, I was with Sammy and Michael over doing the Wabos, and I started as a drum tech, but I was also playing percussion with them during the show. So that was a whole other thing, because I'm like, I'm not a percussionist. Gave me a whole new respect for shaking a tambourine and percussionist, because that's a whole different animal. So I did that for a couple of years, and but I'm also, I got to do a Boston tour, and I was on Michael Jackson, This Is It. So although we didn't tour, obviously, we did a month or two of rehearsals. And
what was that like?
So I don't do pop. I had never done pop before, and that went in there. Here I was, the king of pop, and so yeah, I'd never experienced that before. That was a different experience. Just the power structure, if you will, the hierarchy of a pop thing versus a rock band. I'd only worked for a member of the band, so it's just a totally different animal. But yeah, the Michael Jackson thing, I mean, was the production was astounding. The band was killer. I was working for Sugarfoot, Jonathan Moffat, who was a legend and, super creative guy with his kits and stuff. That's originally why I was brought in, was to help him build his rack and assemble, his to get his design through and into the 3D world,
Yeah.
So, and then of course the unthinkable, happened, and that was a crazy time, to be out there. Yeah.
I'll ask you this, and you don't have to answer that. At any time during these rehearsals, what was the vibe like? Was there ever any like, man, he doesn't seem right, or was it?
I certainly never felt that way. I mean, but again, the
you're so far removed from the audience.
Yeah, the hierarchy. It's like I just remember, the way the stage was designed. He would enter basically upstage center. The drums were just slightly off of that. So that was my world.
Uh-huh.
So he would enter like right over my right shoulder. He would come up, and I just remember, because I'm focused on Sugarfoot. I'm focused on the drummer, right? When and all of a sudden I could feel this, I could sense this whole, it was just not him, his whole entourage, up on stage was surrounded by like, I don't know, a dozen people, it felt like, around him. And then as soon as he went out on stage, but it was just him, and, he was an incredible performer, and always had his act together, and I had a great sense of humor, and was polite to everybody, and the band was like super mega well rehearsed. They were a jukebox, because once Michael was there, it was all about running the show, running the dance moves, and all the extra. The band was spot on. They did all their rehearsing before he got there, as far as getting it spot on. So it was cool. But no, the night before he passed away, we were there late. That was the first time that we did the full run through of Thriller with the full everybody in costume and everything. And so we went late, and everybody was crazy happy. Everybody was, and Michael was thrilled with how it was coming together, and we were there late, and like midnight or something, like working. And the next morning that happened, so no, I had no inclination as to there was any issues. Yeah.
One trend with you that I've noticed from some of the literature that I was sent.
Yeah.
You've had to fill in several times with no rehearsal. It's almost hey man, we're going to need you tonight to play the show. Is that a common thing with drum?
No. I seems like it's getting to be. I'm like, man, nobody's going to hire me anymore or the drummers aren't, yeah, it happened first with ZZ Top in Europe in 2003. And Frank had emergency appendicitis. He had an appendectomy on the night before the show in Paris. And so we had the night off in Paris, and I'd just gone to bed in the hotel room, and my phone rings. It's like 2 a.m. And it's my buddy, the bass tech over there, Billy Hale. And he says, "Hey man, they just carted Frank away on a stretcher." And he said, "Get John to play the show." And I was like, "Yeah, right." And I hung up. I thought it was, practical jokes. That's what, that's how we survive out there. Right. So he called me right back. "No, I'm not kidding." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, that's not funny. I just got to sleep." And now, boom, I hung up again. The next phone call was Billy Gibbons. And then I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, maybe this is legit." So, when you find out at 2, 3 in the morning that you're going to be playing the next night with ZZ Top, guess what you don't do? You don't get to go back to sleep. So no rehearsal, no sleep. So yeah, we did 3 shows total. We did and yeah, it was crazy. Surreal, playing those songs with those beards in front of me, and and getting through the show. And when I hadn't played a show in a long time, and so yeah, again, I had no, and even after that, any tour I did after that, I never went into it thinking, "Oh, I better pay attention and learn these parts," because it just doesn't, most people cancel.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it happened again with Slash on his first solo tour again in Europe. We were in Russia, and that one was unusual because the drummer wasn't the drummer. The bass player got a detached retina, and he had to fly home to have surgery. And there we were in Moscow. We had 2 shows left, and so the drummer Brent Fitz, who's crazy talented, he goes to Slash and says, "Hey, I'll play bass. We'll get JD to play drums. We can do these last 2 shows." And Slash was like, okay. So, that call came at noon on a show day. Now that when Slash came in, we rehearsed. We ran the show down in the afternoon. I was beat, and then I had like an hour break, and then I got to do it again. I was just like, oh, this is killing me. It was hot, and but that was weird because the drummer was playing bass. So he jumped on bass. So I'm playing the gig, but I'm looking at the drummer on bass, and it was, it came together. It happened, so an adventure.
You had some sort of cue playing.
Yeah. He was obviously very helpful on, he would like stop, start, whatever, on the songs that needed it, and which was all of them. So good to have him there. So yeah, it was some crazy stories. And then of course, again, it's not a job. I think post COVID, I think now it's more kind of a thing where some techs have to kind of put on notice just because it's, how it is, man. It's cost so much to cancel a show. And after the hit that all of us took, bands included, at shutdown of COVID, it's like it's too expensive to not try to do this show some way or another. So I think it's becoming more, maybe, I'm not really sure, but I've just heard of some tours going on that they made sure that they had a backup for each guy, not out there, maybe somebody at home learning the show just in case.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I have a buddy who's on a tour just shortly, right when everything starting up again. And the band he was working with, everyone, the band, the crew, they all had to have a B guy.
Yeah.
In case something happened. He was the guitar tech. He was the guitarist B guy. So and he had to have a guy.
A guy. Yeah. A C guy. Yeah.
But he said the shitty thing is when I'm playing guitar, I have to tech my own stuff. Because I'm the tech and the guitar player.
Well, that's what I had to do on those all the shows I played. I played the ZZ show, and then I tore down the kit, and and then of course the next day,
club days, right?
Yes, yeah, kind of sucks all the glamour out of what you just did, but you got the show goes on, you got to get to the next town, so
yeah. And then we'll get to it. Kramer, that happened. You stepped in on what I've heard is like 6 hours notice.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Is it easier for you? Like I don't know if you were a fan of Aerosmith, that you grew up hearing these songs.
Mean, of course you do, but oddly enough, of all the cover bands that I played in, like in high school and after, we never played an Aerosmith song. It never really occurred to me until I had to learn Aerosmith songs. And then I was like, well, I've heard most of these. I mean, how could you not? But I never learned them. And it wasn't in my formative years of playing in cover bands. I don't know why. I'm guessing maybe we never had a singer that could pull it off or something, or 2 guitar players. I don't really know, but it's never happened. So and one thing, I learned pretty early on, especially with like the gun with the Slash one, because that was his first solo tour. So yes, he was doing some Guns N' Roses material, but it was all his new stuff. So there was whatever that was, 10 songs that I'd never heard before. It was just except for on that tour. So, but then when we played like Sweet Child of Mine or something, of course I've heard that for years, and I could air drum to it. Like everybody, when you're driving, of course, that song backwards and forwards, but it's a different animal when you're driving the band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not air drumming along to the song. You're driving. You got to know
when you're driving the band and not driving the car.
Yeah. I mean, it is different, you know, and you can't fake it on the drums. You know, I can't duck behind another guitar player, or you know what I mean. You can't. You're driving, and it's a bit. There's a bit of stress involved.
Right on. And you're still playing with Aerosmith when they perform at this
now.
point? Yeah.
Joey got injured the night before the show in Vegas, and I had expected them to cancel, but for whatever reason they didn't, and so that was, that felt like a miracle. I did the first two shows, and then we had a break, and I went home and I thought, woohoo, I'd played with Aerosmith in Vegas and lived to tell about it, and I thought it would never happen again. Same thing what I thought with the other bands, the other times that happened, because it really is like lightning strikes. It just doesn't strike the same place twice. So it's a very thrilling but humbling and experience, and it's not lost on me trying to the size of the shoes that I'm trying to fill. I mean, Joey is a rock legend, and it created some of the most iconic beats and grooves and fills and stuff in one of the biggest, most iconic bands on the planet.
Yeah.
So what I mean, it's just like, when I say it like that to myself, I'm thinking, eesh, that's a lot to bite off.
Yeah. That's a lot of eyes on you too.
Yeah.
The band has fans of the band, but then there's fans of the member.
Yes.
Walk up and there's a whole section of guys like,
Yeah.
I
know. Yeah. Look, and one thing I learned early on is, don't read the comments on, and that, on a side note, that's how sad is that's humanity, where it's just like, it's just the shit people talk about, about people, online is just sad. But that being said, I won't go down that rabbit hole. Anyway, so I was just given a task to do, and I do it to the best of my abilities, and I totally realizing the magnitude of the shoes that I'm trying to fill in the band. And I try to play those songs with the utmost respect to the parts. That's kind of how I was raised. When I, again, cutting my teeth, playing in cover bands, it's like, I want to learn it like that. That's what I want to see when I go see a band. It's like when I hear somebody playing, Van Halen or Rush or Kiss or any of that stuff, I look at the drum parts just as important as the melody or the lead, or you know what I mean. For me, it all makes those songs what they are. So I try to deliver the Aerosmith stuff, with integrity. But ultimately, I'm going to play it how I play it.
Yeah.
And that it's not going to be like Joey Kramer, and no, I don't care who's playing it. It won't be like Joey Kramer.
Yeah.
It just won't. I mean, but look at the Stones. They played 60 years with Charlie Watts, and and they're out with a Steve Jordan, who's like, come on, how are you going to argue with a player like that? But it's not going to be like Charlie.
No,
just not.
No.
So we do what we can.
Not
that I'm comparing myself to Steve Jordan, by the way.
I had never seen the Stones, and in 2020, or when they had that 2020 tour, I bought tickets finally. And then, of course, it all got canceled.
Yeah.
And when it all got rescheduled, I think Charlie passed away a couple of weeks before.
Oh, man.
But I got to see Steve Jordan. So
I saw, yeah, you did. And I was with ZZ Top in Europe when we opened a couple of shows for the Stones, I think on their 40 Licks tour. And so that was the first time I saw the Stones, and I was like right behind Charlie. And I was so impressed with how he drove that band. I mean, because I don't I don't look at the Stones, and I didn't look at Charlie as being a powerful drummer. Sorry, no offense, but I'm a rock guy, and I did the Stones. What traditional grip? What but he, was a powerful drummer in his way, and he drove that band. I mean, that was my takeaway. I was like, wow, that guy drives that band in a stadium. Yeah, it was super impressive.
Well, man, let's get to your art.
Okay.
You have some amazing artwork. When did you start that? That must have come later. What you're doing?
Well, I guess what we're talking about now is primarily the canvas stuff, like my portraits and stuff on art. Yeah. So that came later, and that really started on tour, when the days off, I gotta be creative. And, so I started carrying canvas and paints, and I paint in my hotel room. And right by now I've got it down. Like I carry the least amount of stuff that I can, and I paint. Like my canvas is unstretched. Obviously I wrap it around a PVC pipe, and it's cut to where it'll fit in just about every overhead compartment on a plane. Obviously on a bus, no problem. And I primarily paint black and white because I love it, but it also works well. I just carry black paint, and I carry white paint, and I carry a handful of paintbrushes, and I mix my paint on a 10-inch drum head, and all that stuff goes in my suitcase. And then I carry the canvas, and every hotel I'm in, the first thing I do is walk in, I look for a blank wall, and I tape the canvas up to the wall, and I paint. So
how long
eventually
to make it very compact, like when you started?
Yeah, it was a process. I mean, because initially I was, painting color, and you got to carry all that color, and so yeah, eventually I just, again, I love to paint black and white. Given it, that's my thing. Is I love black and white movies. I love black and white photography. I love black and white, and so I just kind of whittled it down, and just it's a necessity. You're a road guy. We try to keep our
even like doing this on the road, this podcast. Like when I first started it on the road, I thought I had to have this. Now I carry 258s, a recorder, and some batteries for the recorder.
Yeah,
it all fits small. Yeah,
I mean, it's the same reason why it was like when it went to like an iPod. Remember before that, we'd carry the Sony Discman, and then you have to carry all your CDs in your sleeves. You know what I mean? It was like you get that down to, and if you're a reader, like I like to read, well, you'd have to carry a couple of paperback books, and it's now all that is like on an iPad or your phone.
Yeah,
which really helped tour life. So all your music and anyway, so yeah, that's all part of the process of. But I paint the same even when I'm home.
Oh, okay.
I paint unstretched. I still paint primarily black and white, and because that's how I learned. So I learned on the road. I basically learned to paint drums and guitars. Is how I learned. Is what I learned to paint on, and then I've branched out over into a canvas.
Yeah,
like fine art.
Yeah,
fine art.
In the beginning, were you just painting for yourself?
Yeah, just paint, and because I like to paint a lot of different stuff, and when I'm commissioned, or when I'm painting somebody's drums or guitars or whatever, obviously that's, hey, what do you want? And I do try to do whatever, but when I'm left to my own devices, like what does John really like to paint? I like to paint people. That to me is the ultimate challenge. It's difficult. I love the process. I love the outcome typically. And so I love to paint people. And then, so, okay, now what? Well, I'm still a music fan. I love rock and roll, and I love, or pop culture, movies or whatever. So I paint primarily rock and roll, rock stars, musicians, and I like to paint them live. I want to, if he's a guitar player, I want to see a guitar in his hand. If he's a singer, I'm basically just trying to capture a rock and roll moment of somebody in what I consider, a pose or look that's captures what that artist is about on stage.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of these people I've worked for, so I think I have maybe a better understanding of what that is, or at least my take on how to capture that guitar player, that singer, whatever, on canvas in something that hopefully somebody would look at and go, yeah, that's exactly when I think of Jimmy Page, that's what I think of, or, whatever. And so that's what I try to do, because again, it's just like painting drums is the ultimate combination of my two loves of art and music. So is this in a way. It's just kind of flip flop. Now I'm painting musicians on canvas as opposed to painting stuff on musical instruments. There's still a marriage of my two greatest passions, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I love the process.
Yeah. You've worked with a lot of these artists that you've painted. Well, not a lot, but
A few. Yeah.
What's it like when they see that something you've done of them? Is it very flattering, or have they ever walked in and go, "Hey, yeah, it's great, man"?
Well, I think early on, that was not really my goal. I tried to keep it separate. First of all, I wasn't always painting who I was working for.
Yeah.
I was just painting just for my own sanity and to keep those chops together on the road. And then, I think the more involved I got in it, the more some people would say, well, they would ask that very question. Do you ever show that to these people? It's like, nah, it's not what I'm here for, and then I began to realize that I'm an idiot in that, some people would say, dude, you have an opportunity that, every other artist would kill for. You have access to a lot of these people. You should show them. You should get that painting signed by them. And it took me a while to overcome that hurdle of, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm a drum tech here to do that job. And so eventually I'm like, okay, yeah, I started kind of doing that, and everybody's always been really cool. And fortunately, because it'd probably not be a good thing to show it to the boss, whoever that would be, and them not appreciate it. But everybody's been super, super kind in that, and supportive and complimentary. A few of the guys, have my originals. And, when it comes to like doing a show, like I had a show in Vegas in December to coincide with the Aerosmith residency. And, I would contact some of the guys that I had worked for in the past and that I had done paintings of, like obviously Steven and Joe, that's a no brainer, but Slash and John Bon Jovi, who's, super, a guy like that who, I'm a drum tech. I just worked for Tico. Yeah. I didn't have any dealings with JBJ, but he's super cool. And he loved the painting that I did of him. And so like I just shot him an email and said, hey, if I sent you some prints, would you sign them for it? Absolutely. And I send him, and he's super gracious to sign my stuff. And cause that takes the art to another level, for my show, to have stuff signed by the people that I paint.
Right on.
So,
that was my next question. Where can people see your art?
Well, obviously my website is like my portfolio, when it has most everything that I've drums and guitars, and, if I've painted, jet skis, whatever, but all my canvas stuff is on there. But right now it's a lot of it's still hanging at the art gallery in Las Vegas. It's called An Amazing Gallery. It's in the Grand Canal Shops, kind of by the Venetian.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of paintings there. I still have some paintings in the gallery in Florida, in Jacksonville, Gallery 725. So, but they basically will arrange to have a show in a gallery, and I'll come in there, and then I'm there for a couple of days, and then they keep some of my paintings afterwards, and then they just kind of ship from there.
And people can
they're on their own tour. Yeah.
And people can purchase your paintings on your website.
No,
Reprint.
I'm not a commercial site. They can look at them, they can inquire about them, but I don't, the gallery business is a lot like the music business. I learned pretty quickly. And so the galleries are like the record companies, they have the distribution, or at least the record companies of old. And, and I don't want to be a salesman. I don't want to be, an art salesman or anything. I'm flattered somebody likes it. Obviously I deal with people on drums, guitars, commissions. That's a different animal, but just buying my works or prints of my stuff, that I leave to the professionals. And, I don't ever want to compete with the galleries. I need the galleries to be successful. Selling my stuff, and that's supports, obviously supports that business that in turn not only sells my art, but they sell other artwork by other artists. And that's what those artists need as well. So it's, I don't compete with art galleries.
Right on, man.
Because I need them to succeed.
Yeah. And do you have
Makes
anything else coming up other than those two?
I don't have any. No, I don't have any show. There's some things in the works, but I don't have any dates or anything. Because I'm kind of in a bit of Aerosmith limbo. There's some stuff in the works there, and so I got to scheduling is a more complex than a normal schmo.
Yeah. On that note, you recently performed with Michael Anthony and Phil X.
All
of a sudden, Michael Anthony said there was some chatter about a new band. Is there a new band with you guys?
That's such a great rumor. Thank you. I mean, and I hate to be the one to dispel a great rumor, but here's how that happened. So I love Michael. He's great. I love Phil. So I obviously have tech for Bon Jovi, right? And so Phil, who's an awesome guitar player and an even more awesome dude, he would try to come down to sound check early whenever he could, and he and I would jam, usually old Van Halen.
Yeah,
because that's our common ground, and he obviously, he knows I've worked for Al for years, and so I play Tico's kid, and he'd play guitar, sometimes sing, and we jam old Van Halen until a Bon Jovi sound check would start. So we did that on a pretty regular basis, and then so last year when we did I did a short Bon Jovi tour a year ago, and we were doing that, and he said, "Hey man, let's record that. Let's record me and you, because we multi-track obviously, and we can record it live." And we'll get the video guys to video us. Because again, this is kind of post-COVID when all the remote recording got real popular, right? So he goes, "Let's do that. Then let's get Michael Anthony to play bass and sing the backup vocals. And then I'll get somebody to sing lead on this song. Let's do that." I'm like, okay. So he and I did that, and then Phil took the ball, and that's how that started. So is that a super group? Is that a band? Again, awesome rumor. And I'm flattered to be in the same company with those guys. And hey, look, when those headlines came out, I was just as surprised as you were. And my phone blew up, and, so I called Phil, and I was like, "What?" He goes, "I know, what's this?" And I called Michael, and he's kind of, man, and so I just said, "Well, okay, well, what time's sound check? Let's go. What times when do we rehearse? Are we going to rehearse for this thing or what?" So, yeah, I don't know what to say beyond that, what's may or may not become of that, but it's a great bunch of guys, and, I look forward to hearing it. and not reading the comments.
Right on, man. Right on. Well, brother, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Like I said, I know I've been blowing up your phone for the last year.
Oh,
And thank you. I know you're.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Bernie.
This podcast, it's called "Is Breakfast Included?" And if it was included, what would you have?
Well, I love the title. First of all, my first thing is like I'm a backline guy. I try never to get up for breakfast. You know that. But I do love like a spinach omelet. The spinach and mushroom omelet would be what I would have, and maybe some fresh squeezed orange juice if we're in that part of the world. Yeah, even if it's lunch, that's a good lunch too. Yeah,
I like it. I like breakfast at all times of the day.
Yeah. We had here at home. We had breakfast the other night for dinner. We had bacon and eggs and waffles, and it was like, I love this because I don't get a lot of breakfasts. I try not to wake up for breakfast, but
I think one of the things I miss most about the residency is our grocery trips.
I know that. Yeah, you get asked that a lot. I mean, I personally think the residency is the way to go. That's the future of touring, man. I'm like, I had never done it until Aerosmith. And of course, obviously it always looks good on paper, especially for, what do you mean? We only load in once and then we do X number of shows. And then it's a dream come true for a crew guy. Yeah. Right. And for me, I don't gamble and I don't drink or anything like that. So everybody's like, but for me, lots of painting time, on that. I just go right back to my room and I paint, and then we go grocery shopping, or maybe we go catch a movie, and then come back, and I got the full kitchen, and I loved it, man. And I would walk to the gig and play the show, and then I go to the dressing room and change because I was pretty sweaty, and then I would walk back from the gig with people wearing Aerosmith t-shirts and talking about the show, and nobody recognizes me, and I'm okay with that. I would get into elevators with everybody still talking about the show, wearing their shirts. And sometimes, hey, were you at the show? I was like, yeah. What'd you think? Huh? Yeah, it's pretty good. So I love that aspect of it. I love being the everything about the residency, especially in Vegas, so it was always great for people watching.
Yeah. I agree. But I agree with you about the residency. It should be the way to go for future of touring.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what with the sphere going on there, and U2, and what that's going to do to that level of residency. I'm curious to see. I think it's going to be awesome.
Well, cool, brother. I have taken enough of your time. I do appreciate you doing this again, man. I look forward to seeing you, crossing paths.
Yeah, man. Or maybe we do that often. I was going to say, what's up next for you? What's going on with Duran Duran? But we could do that off the air, huh?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
But, it was good talking to you, man.
Thanks, Bernie.
All right, brother. Take care.
Speak to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
John Douglas, everyone. You can find his art at johndouglas.com. Man, what an interesting life, right? Like, I'll go ahead and tell you, JD is one of the best people I know, and I've always said good things come to good people. And, he deserves every bit of what he's getting right now. I would say that if he was doing bad shit too, like, that son of a bitch deserves every bit of what he's getting. But no, he does a lot of good stuff, and he deserves a lot of good energy coming back to him. Anyway, so you guys send me some healing vibes from this Namthrax, man. It's really kicking my ass. Just kidding. It's going to go away on its own. Go visit our web store, isbreakfast.bigcartel.com. Buy a shirt, buy a couple of shirts, and support this podcast. Listen to it, subscribe, comment, submit a review, give us 5 stars. I'd say give us 6, but it only lets you give us 5. All right, guys. You know what? Real quick, that story about him playing for ZZ Top, he didn't really tell the story I wanted him to tell, but up until at the time when he played for ZZ Top, he was the only, let me see if I get this right, non-original member to ever play with the trio up until Dusty's passing a couple years ago, and then Elwood took over for Dusty. So John, that's a pretty big flex, and he doesn't flex it at all. Anyway, all right, guys, I am done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.